Welcome to the Defence Forces podcast, brought to you by the Defence Forces Public Relations Branch.
Hello and welcome to the Irish Defence Forces podcast. My name is Captain Cian Clancy, and today we welcome onto the show Naval Service Lieutenant Gary Jordan, a Marine Engineer Officer serving with the Irish Naval Service, and also Project Officer for the Midlife Refit of the Irish naval vessel Ellie Roisin. Today we're going to talk about the details of the refit project and what undertaking such a project entails. Welcome onto the show, Gary. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Cian. Thanks.
So I'm going to start and just ask you a bit about yourself. So can you give us a bit of your own background and introduce yourself? What drew you to the Naval Service, where you're from?
Yeah, I'm just from local, Keena in Cork. I joined as a school leaver in 2003 as an executive branch cadet. It was during that time then that I realised that the subjects that I was doing in school were more aligned to marine engineering, and I did a transfer during the first year of cadets. Second year of cadets was our first year within college to do marine and plant engineering. That was in National Maritime College of Ireland, out in Ringaskiddy. From there then it was just more between college time and seagoing experience. Graduated in 2007 and took on further sea time again to gain what's called a watchkeeping certificate to become a fourth engineer. Again, further sea time, took up a position then on completion of my second engineering watchkeeping ticket on LEIFA from 2010 to 2012. From there I was afforded an opportunity to complete a further education, complete a diploma in small craft surveying. On completion of my time on board LEIFA then, I was doing shore-based appointments in what's called a Planning Inspectorate Maintenance Management Office. Coming to 2014 then I actually applied for a leave of absence for a career break. The objective of that really was just to kind of extend my education and gain a further qualification in the chief engineering license. So I spent about just over a year on a super yacht based in the Caribbean and south of France.
Wow, that sounds very nice.
Yeah, it was good at the time. And during that time I was lucky as well to begin an MSc in marine surveying as well, so I was doing that at the same time. When I finished on the super yacht then I actually moved on to Queen Mary 2, the cruise liner, and that was again over and back between the Southampton and USA, and a round the world trip on it as well. I was lucky enough. Came back into the Defence Forces then 2016 and completed my chief engineer course at NMCI again. Started the role of MEO out in Ellie, and a year later I found myself in Op Sophia back down the Med.
Wow.
But this time on a navy ship as opposed to cruise ships and super yachts.
It's doing a much different job, I imagine.
Yeah, completely different. Yeah. 2018 then, while still on board Ellie Neve, I completed a certificate in naval architecture. So that was again furthering my education within here. Became a member then of the Royal Institute of Naval Architects, and finished after 2.5 years on board P52 Ellie Neve, and found myself as project manager then on P51 Ellie Roisin, which is one project of the full P50 MLEP program, the midlife extension program.
Wow, there's an awful lot of education and further education going on in there, Gary. In fairness, fair play. Just for people at home as well, can you give us a bit of background information on Ellie Roisin? Like how long has she been in service, and what prompts the need for a midlife refit program or midlife extension program?
Yeah, Ellie Roisin, P51, she was built in Appledore, North Devon in the UK and commissioned into service then in 1999. She's 78 metre long, offshore patrol vessel with decent Wärtsilä engines, and normally have crew of 44. And what would prompt the midlife extension project then would be the usual for ships' hulls would be 30 years expectancy. So we've got a little bit over the 15 years here. So you'll also have major electrical upgrades that need to take place. There's technological advances constantly going on in the maritime industry as well. Mm-hmm. So we had to kind of make sure we're up to modern speed with those systems. And that's mainly the objective of it then, is just to advance and upgrade the ship then.
Okay, right. Just within like international best practice and international standards. Can you outline just like your specific role as project manager and what kind of you're managing the entire project, but what goes into that?
I wasn't actually involved in the planning stages for the program itself. There was a separate team. I was on board P52 Ellie Neve, so they would have touched base with me just to gain some advice on what was required out in the vessel. But there was a separate project team based ashore. It took about 2 years for the planning of it. So there was a lot of OEM, which would be the original equipment manufacturers, a lot of interviews with them. They would have engaged a lot of stakeholders, the Planning Inspectorate Maintenance Management Office. They would have had feasibility studies done, they would have had surveys done, and then they would have been doing further investigation into then what best equipment would be required to get on board the ships then once they're outfitted.
Right, and then just for yourself then, yeah, like your specific kind of responsibilities then would be like controlling budgetary stuff, or
Yeah, so there's 3 of us in the PMO, the Project Management Office, and once we get into once the planning process is finished, then we're into the execution phase. So from there we're continuously monitoring and controlling the project itself, and making sure that the scope is held to the schedule of work is kept at. The budget is maintained. It's a significant budget, obviously, for a project and program like this. And this constant engagement in with the main contractor, OEMs, as I said, that would be coming over, service engineers. And we also had a crew on board at the time as well, on site. So it's constant engagement with them as well.
All right. Fair enough. So to go into a little bit more detail into the actual carrying out of the project and of the program. So I know it's been broken down into a number of phases. Can you go through what was involved in phase 1 with me?
Yeah, so you did 3 phases. Phase 1 was dry dock phase, phase 2 wet berth phase, and phase 3 the outfitting and refit phase. Phase 1 is basically when the ship is brought into dry dock. So that's the ship is out of water on blocks and held in that dry dock. Underneath the ship is fully inspected, and you've removal of your propellers, your shafts, your drive shafts, your bow thruster, your stabilizers. It's a full survey of the under hull of the ship. What also happens in there then as well for this project in particular is there's a full grit blasting of the ship from front to back, which is basically high pressure grit blasted at the ship to remove the paint. So it brings it back to red steel, as we call it. And that gives us an opportunity then to do ultrasonic testing on the full hull, just to see is there degradation on the hull, to see if there's a minimum thickness required on the hull on ships, and just to see if that has gone down to its minimum, or is there a requirement for steel to be replaced anywhere. That's just on the underhull of it, but then you also have work kicking off above the waterline as well.
And like as regards say machinery on board, like, and that kind of stuff, at what point do you start looking at that?
No, that'd be further on in the project. Then into the next phase is there was one major replacement that we required a dry dock for. That's the removal of side of the ship. Mm-hmm. So you have your domestic services on board, your sewage treatment plant, your domestic freshwater module. They're located below the waterline, and they can only be removed and replaced in dry dock. It requires cutting out of the steel up in that area of the ship, and there was reconfiguration required in there as well, because of the different sizes. As we were coming into best practice and conform to regulations, required the maritime regulations, the size of the plant increased, and therefore there was a kind of a reorg required inside that area then. But any other machinery then was further on down the line then.
Okay, and that then it was just a function of, say, international best practice moving on from, say, 1999 when the ship would have come into service. There was a certain requirement, and then there's been revisions since then.
Yeah, you've constant updates on maritime requirements and regulations, but it also down to the fact that the obsolescence of parts played a big role in the extension project as well. Those items of machinery and equipment are there from the original build, and those spare parts then aren't available anymore. So the companies will have moved on in their technology and their plants and machinery, and we'll keep up to speed with them then.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, right. So that was phase 1, where it was actually brought back out onto dry dock and sandblasted and that kind of thing. So moving on to phase 2, I believe there was a very significant undertaking in phase 2, actually alongside the quay wall. Yeah,
phase 2 was a much longer period because there was significant electrical work to be carried out. It was a full cable replacement on board, upgrading all the electronic systems, the comm systems, the talkback systems, gyros, compass, fire control systems. There was some minor services take place then inside, the removal of pipework, removal of pumps, replacement of all those systems, replacement of Cali davits, which are your boat launching cranes. So they're an upgraded version of the previous cranes that were on board as well. There was a replacement of all your anchor handling machinery and an anchor replacement as well. One big challenge that was required to be addressed during a normal survey alongside that period. We found that there was huge degradation within a silencer, exhaust gas silencer, which are basically they're units about 2 stories tall that will have insulation and soundproofing material inside them. Once we found that they'd endured damage, just from age, you're required to remove the actual funnel of the ship, which is taking off the top of the ship basically to remove these and replace with new ones. It was a challenge then. I suppose in the middle of that, it's throwing your schedule out of sync. It's adding to budgetary costs. But these are all the challenges that we'd face in as a project management team.
Yeah, of course, yeah, and there's obviously going to be probably some unexpected things that you do see happen. Just with regard to, say, exhaust silencers, is that to silence the noise of the engines inside the ship or externally?
Both, yeah. So it's the exhaust gas will be coming up through it, but you'll have insulation surrounding it the whole way up from the exhaust outlet and the engine to the top of the funnel. Hence why the entire funnel would have had to come off for that. It's taken off the top of the ship.
So then moving on to phase 3, I believe there's a lot of internal work involved in that part of it.
Yeah, the phase 3 was the outfitting phase, the refit phase. This was where the ship was actually brought back to Holbourne Naval Base and the work carried out here. The unfortunate thing there was, I suppose, we met 2 challenges there. Was the pandemic itself, the COVID-19 and the Brexit. It just made things a lot more difficult trying to get spare parts in, trying to get service engineers over. That was the first challenge we faced, and we were hoping that it would be a straightforward phase. So the phase 3 then, so that was fully interior work mainly. So there was an outfitting of the galley, the ship's kitchen there. So that was brought back right to a steel base, right back to steel floor, steel walls. And we brought in our own chefs in from the naval base and got them to assist in the design of it. At the end of the day, they're the end users. They're the guys that will be trying to cook our meals when they're out at sea. So it was just to make things easier for them. And then, as well as that, then it was just the interior soft furnishings was all completed as well. And that would be your decks, your floors, your mess areas, your living spaces. And again, the aim there was just to make things upgraded and more comfortable for people when they're at sea. But internally as well, then you had machinery upgrades. You had your main engines, the Wärtsilä main engines were also serviced, generators, air compressors, all the machinery that we could be doing on our side over here without specialist contractors having to be brought in. Where we found those challenges with Brexit and the pandemic was bringing OEMs and service engineers into commission systems further on. But then I had 2 guys in my office, and they were also working in the background and bringing on all the new equipment as assets, is what we'd call them. So they had to go onto the system, they had to be captured as new equipment, all their maintenance had to be uploaded. And you're starting fresh nearly with a new ship nearly.
Yeah, and I find it interesting though as well. I mean, and very forward looking that the chefs were brought in and consulted on it, as in how to put this kind of how to put this equipment back in and how it's going to be used. Like, you know, and we obviously all know that the food is very important out at sea. Like, you know, and that's one of the
the important thing, I suppose, was to speak to the people that would be on the ground, the end users. So even in, as I mentioned about the upgrading of the interior messes, this is where they have their downtime, where people at sea have their downtime and they'll watch their bit of telly in the evenings and that. So it had to suit them as well, and it had to be comfortable for them, especially at sea. They're all in there together, and it was just a common sense approach to bring the end users in and discuss all these options with them.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, no, that, I mean, it just sounds, I mean, and that phase of it is so important. So at this point, we've gone through, as you say, we've gone through phase 1, which is your dry dock phase, phase 2, your wet berth phase, and then phase 3, the outfitting phase. So at that point, what is the process for getting Roisin back to sea and, like, you know, certifying her?
Yeah, effectively, you're breathing life back into a ship that has been idle for 2 years. So it's going to be a slow process, and that's. I mean, we did our own snag list on board first, see what we were going to be facing, and then we move into what's called the harbour acceptance trials, or HATs. This is a significant period and a significant milestone. It's a long period as well. It's a running up of every bit of equipment, testing everything, testing them to their limits alongside, seeing what the issues are, and dealing directly with OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, the service engineers on that. And basically ticking all the boxes that the ship is safe to operate, but in an alongside mode prior to bringing it to sea.
And And like, would you have come across many sort of challenges in that, like, or?
Yeah, just again, the pandemic was a major challenge there. It would have probably been completed sooner. It did end up having a delay for us due to guys trying to get work done, and you're making sure there's social distancing involved. Trying to get service engineers from Italy or the UK even is difficult. There's quarantine issues. There's red lists, and we've been through all that. So that was the biggest challenge there. We got over the Brexit side of things with parts, delay in parts coming in.
Yeah.
But we got them on time due to the delay because of the pandemic as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it all
exactly.
worked in well together.
One delay sort of helped another delay to a certain extent. And like, so taking Roisin out to sea, that must have been a big moment as well for her crew as well. You know, it must have been a really sort of moment of celebration almost.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed there when we were ready to go on sea trials. It was what I noticed the pride in the captain's face. Actually, Lieutenant Commander Grace Fanning, it was a very proud moment for her, and that's one of the things that we noticed from it. She's been with the ship since it began its MLEP downtime, and for her to bring it out to harbour then was a huge significant moment for us, for ourselves as well in the project management office, and for the crew that have been with the ship since the start of the MLEP, and those that have joined as new crew members to bring her to sea. So they then began the sea acceptance trials, which is again just putting all the machinery through their limits, pushing them to their limits, and just operating everything that has been changed and upgraded.
Yeah, and like, so, and with the sea acceptance trials, is that for a long period of time? Would the vessel be taken out for a number of days, or what? To go through everything, like, so I presume, like, as part of the sea acceptance trials, there's obviously like the hull and all that kind of the kind of life stuff needs to be tested, but also like the kitchens and the kind of, everybody needs to sort of see how everything is working.
Yeah, the majority of it was completed during the HATS, the harbour acceptance trials there, so everything was run up. The sea acceptance trials are just about a week long mainly. It's just to run everything up in the environment at sea, make sure everything is, I suppose, held together in a way, and can take the sea. So they completed that within a week, which was good. The hats, as I said, were 4 or 5 weeks long, and that's the real important one.
Yeah. And so at this point, then after the sea acceptance trials, Roisin is ready for to go back to sea, or is there more after that? Or
there's one more little tick the box exercise, which is just into a short dry dock. Again, only a week long, and that's just basically just to confirm that everything underneath has survived the sea trials, you could say, and then she'll be going fully operational. So we're at the close out phase now of the project and opening up for the next one.
Fantastic, and I suppose then to move on. So you are you continuing on as a project manager? So there's another midlife refit in train.
Yeah, so it's the midlife extension program with the two projects, P51 and P52, Roisin and Niamh, respectively. So Niamh, she was 2001 when she came into service, so she's also meeting her criteria for the life extension program. So we're beginning the initiation phase now of that as well, her sister ship. A lot of lessons learned and can be taken over to it. But yeah, myself and my project management team below and the office are carrying on this one. And it'll be a new crew to face their challenges over in dry dock and phase 2 and phase 3.
Hopefully without the challenges that COVID-19 and Brexit brought. But I suppose that'll be an interesting kind of one to add to your experience in the Naval Service as well, to have said that you had presided over the extension projects of both Roisin and Niamh of an entire kind of class of ships. Yeah,
it's been great experience. Just learning the project management processes. I actually began undertaking a master's in project and program management at the moment since last September in University of Limerick. So it's all kind of linked together there, and it suits to be able to apply your theory to practice live there with the program, the MLEP.
100%. There's lots of fodder there for college assignments. You've lots of experience you could throw in. Fair play to you as well for going back and
busy 2 years. Yeah,
I wonder. That's fantastic. Well, at the end of that, thanks very much for an excellent breakdown of the project. A lot of those details most people would have no idea about, Gary. So listen, thanks very much for coming on. It's very much appreciated. Thanks for talking to us.
Yeah, you're welcome. No problem, Cian.
For further information on the Irish Defence Forces, check out our social media channels and military.ie. Serving members are also encouraged to check out the members area of military.ie. The Irish Defence Forces podcast is available on Spotify, Acast, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. This episode was produced by Corporal Keith Harrison of the Defence Forces Audiovisual School. The Irish Defence Forces podcast will be back soon with further episodes. Until then, thanks for listening and stay safe.